Good afternoon, friends. Stephen Ben here with Israeli News Live. Two major things I'm watching closely right now, and one, of course, is Israel actually about to try to take out Iranian nuclear targets? Are they about ready to go to war with Iran? We already know that the White House under the Biden administration is trying to reestablish negotiations with Iran. I'm going to be talking about that this evening. But also, this article by Mordecai Kedar, he's questioning, is Israel in contact with Syria? Seems to be that they may very well be. And of course, doesn't mean they're in contact directly with Bashar al-Assad, but at least some factions of his government trying to work out some agreement with Israel. And of course, I can't help but think about how that we know scripturally, the Bible says, who can make war with the beast? Well, we say the beast. Why? Because we know that the political aspect of Israel is very much representative of, as Jesus said in Matthew 24, when he, or not Matthew, I think it's Matthew 23, called the Pharisees of that day a bunch of serpents and vipers. We can only imagine just what it says in the book of Revelation as well. But anyway, Israel is in contact with Syria, according to the article here by Mordecai Kedar, and at the same time, Israel is about ready to do an attack on Iran. Now, just to remind you, I shared this with you guys yesterday, but I want to bring this back up again. A good friend of mine in Israel had sent this to me. Down with Iran was the way he titled his letter. He said, the wife is telling me to prep for war and that Israel will most likely attack Iran. She's hearing it from every direction. My wife knows all the banks, builders, politicians in Israel, and I know this for a fact as well. Many times they get pictures where they're sitting there right there with the prime minister just one or two seats over from them. And he says to me, this does not mean a definite, but means about 90% Israel is going to take out Iran. As he says, if she's saying this with that look on her face, it's almost showtime. Also, another military individual came into their home that same day. I don't have that made where you can see what is said there. But he asked that individual as well, are we going to war with Iran? And with a very grim look on her face, she said, yes, it definitely appears to be the case. So he goes on to say, my feeling from my sources, and this is other military sources that he knows also in the government there, is that Iran is going to get smashed soon. Israel will not allow Iran to operate in Syria, Lebanon, or have nukes. Of course, the next statement in this letter here is because he knows, I know that Iran has nukes. So he says, Iran has them already, I know. But Israel will strike Iran and destroy them. We will be hit too, but it must be this way at this time. He says, I will die in a nuke blast. I'm at ground zero. That's because he lives right there beside the Shin Bet headquarters and Mossad headquarters there in Netanya. Anyway, he also talks about this kind of really weird. I didn't really get this. I have to ask him about that. The Zebizmen will be fighting the orcs coming from the city under the Euphrates River, supported by the CIA, satanic traitors, and ISIS. I need to get some clarification on that one. That's a little bit odd, right? Anyway, let's jump back over here to Mordecai Kedar, and we're going to kind of look at some other news coming out. Before I go to Mordecai Kedar's article there, to kind of share with you this information where it makes a little bit more sense. The Times of Israel is reporting that they're paving the way for a lockdown extension in Israel. Now, I've reported to you many times before from good info from Mossad folks there in Israel that anytime they talk about doing these lockdowns, it has only been in order to keep the people mobilized or immobile, so because of the fear of going to war with Iran. And so they're extending this lockdown. And again, that's, it's trying to keep the people in one place, as I'm being told. It's all under the guise of the, pandemic, but it's not really the case, right? So it's important to know that. Also, Iran, this came out today. Jason Brodsky put out the video here himself. And this is Iran's solid fuel rocket. All right, solid fuel rocket. They're test firing this thing in Iran. Very much capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. But when you're dealing with a rocket like this, that's intercontinental ballistic type missiles technology. So Iran is moving along quite fast, quite rapid with that. We know that the Biden administration has said that Iran is only weeks away from being able to put together a nuclear weapon. So even with them, they're really saying a lot of things there. We're going to talk a little bit here in just a minute, though, also where Christian Amanpour interviews Foreign Minister Zarif about returning to the nuclear deal. But Israel's already said if Iran and the United States reestablish this nuclear deal, Israel is going to attack Iran. They've made no bones about it. But the article here by Mordecai Keter is really interesting, some of the things that he wrote in the article here. I want to drop down to this one part here. Halaby asked, do the Russians convey messages from Syria to you? The officer answered, yes, certainly, and not only through them. Syrian messages reach us in other ways and constantly. When Halaby asked, what do the Syrians want from you? He received this reply. This is what he's saying the Syrians are wanting. They want to go back to the Arab League and they want economic aid. Fuel, for example. They need money to pay the Iranians to get out of Syria. And they want to solidify their regime. Assad sees the reality and he wants to forge ties with the Sunni axis so that he can pay his debts to Iran and get them out of Syria. He sees that Israel can help him with the U.S. on the one hand and with the Gulf axis and the Sunni axis on the other. The Russians, too, see us as a bridge to the U.S., to the Gulf, and to the Sunni axis. Assad fears that his government could fall and won't make peace with us tomorrow. But he is now prepared to talk with us and to shore up his rule and defray the financial debt to Iran and create a situation of belligerency with Israel. And after that, negotiations on the Golan and other things. All right, so it's kind of interesting when you begin to read the article. One, we see rather quickly, the article is not so much that Israel is meeting directly with Assad and Assad's government, but with a faction that has not necessarily even forged a good, maybe a lasting relationship with the Assad government. So therefore, it's kind of like jumping the gun. But they must have some types of ties in there. Because if we go down in the article, look what it says here. This is completely clear. Assad sees no reason why Iran should remain in Syria. And no less important, the Russians don't want Tehran and its offshoots, the Shiite militias, and Syria either. Moscow's interests are to rehabilitate the Syrian regime by finding a solution for the Idlib enclave and for the thousands of Islamist opponents of Assad who are besieged and dug in there, to find a solution for the Kurdish problem in a way that will get Turkey out of Syria and out of its conflict with the Kurds, and to find a solution to the Iranian problem so Israel will stop its military strikes in Syria. Now, that's another interesting thing here. I don't have it up in front of me as of right now, but I just got an email from a good friend of mine, Israeli journalist out of Israel, who had also said to me in an email he sent to me today that there is about to be a major shakeup politically in Turkey. I got to go back and find out exactly what's in there. Maybe I can share some of that with you here before we close out in the broadcast. I'll try to find that. We'll come back to it. So anyway, going back to this, the Kremlin's primary interest is to pull its military forces out of the country, as the continued Russian presence in Syria is a heavy drain on the Russian economy. The sooner the Syria resumes the status of functioning state, the sooner Moscow can withdraw its troops. In addition, Russia wants to speed up the production of the Syrian gas from the Mediterranean seabed so Damascus can pay its debt for the aid Russia has given the Assad regime in recent years. At the end of the day, everybody is there to get their little cut of the pie. They start this entire alleged civil war, which it wasn't a civil war. It was the U.S. trying to overthrow Syria. And even as I had been told before, they considered Syria the backbone of the Middle East. If they break Syria, then they can control the rest of the Middle East. Now, I don't quite figure out how that works yet, but that's what has been told to me. So, but as I watch this article here, everybody wants their piece. When Trump was there, he was controlling everything east of the Euphrates River there, so he could basically steal all the natural gas and oil reserves there and was sending them out of the country. Russia took pretty much everything to the west of the Euphrates River, and of course ISIS has a little bit of the south down there by Bukamal and those areas there. So everybody's getting a piece of this country. And the Iranians, of course, as we see by the article here, they want to be paid off as well for their involvement of kicking ISIS mostly out of the country. Well, you got to pay for the war somehow, so it makes sense. I understand the economics behind that, but the Syrian people are the ones that are going to have to be footing this bill for years to come. Moving down a little further in the article, this is where they get into the aspects of how this meeting went down. On the Syrian side, the participants were head of the National Security Bureau, General Ali Mamlouk, and Assad's security affairs advisors, Bassam Hassan. On the Israeli side, there were Lieutenant General Reserve Gadi Izankot and Ari Ben Menasseh, a former top Mossad official, and the meeting was hosted by the Russian General Alexander Tikov, according to the report. This issue that arose in the meetings were remarkably similar to those raised in the briefing and the General Staff Officer gave Mayedi Halabi. While the details might not entirely be entirely accurate or complete, it appears that intensive Israeli-Syrian contacts are being held behind the scenes. These talks will also address the Golan Heights, if they haven't already, he notes. And one of the reports spoke of the possibility that Israel will hand Syria control of the Druze villages on the Golan. And by the way, the Druze community had always been very strong advocates for President Bashar al-Assad. So to see that Israel might be considering allowing some of those villages there on the Golan to be handed over to the Syrian government is a very, very big step. Very big step. But then there was this one part in this next paragraph. This really caught my attention. Nothing really to do with the peace. It's where the money is. Watch what it states. The great task that stands before President Assad is to rehabilitate his country, its infrastructure, industry, cities, and residential neighborhoods, which were totally or partially destroyed during the Civil War. This endeavor will take decades and require huge sums that the country does not have access to, particularly amid the global economic recession caused by COVID-19 crisis. But watch what the last sentence says. The only concentrations of money in the world right now are in China and the Persian Gulf. Isn't that interesting? The only concentrations of money in the world right now are in China and the Persian Gulf. China, as we all know, wealthy, multi-billionaire companies, many of them Jewish companies. I know I had friends of mine that actually moved their infrastructure and manufacturing companies to China back in the 90s. They made China a superpower. And you don't think that Israel doesn't have, they're not the puppet masters of this country? Sure they are. The Silk Road Initiative. It's all the brainchild of Israel. And of course, they're going to control every single bit of it. So I find that interesting. All right, let's move on over then now to the interview with Christian Amanpour and that of Foreign Minister Zarif, because this is what's hinging on bringing about normalcy between the United States and Iran again. But Israel's not going to let it happen.
Biden,
Listen
even when he was a candidate before the election, he laid out his, strategy, his foreign policy, and the aim of getting back into the JCPOA. This is what he said. He said in September, "I will offer Tehran a credible path back to diplomacy. If Iran returns to strict compliance with the nuclear deal, the United States would rejoin the agreement as a starting point for follow-on negotiations. With our allies, we will work to strengthen and extend the nuclear deal's provisions while also addressing other issues of concern." There's a lot in there. Is that a deal Iran could take up?
Well, you see, first of all, the United States needs to establish its bona fides to come back to the nuclear deal. The United States is not in the nuclear deal, and it's not in the nuclear deal because of its own decision to withdraw without taking the routes that were available to it within the nuclear agreement. On the other hand, Iran used the mechanisms in the nuclear agreement in order to limit its cooperation. If you read paragraph 36, we acted in strict accordance with the nuclear agreement. Now, the United States needs to come back into compliance, and Iran will be ready immediately to respond. The timing is not the issue. The issue is whether the United States, whether the new administration wants to follow the old policies of the failed policies of the Trump administration or not. Now we can discuss the other issue that President Biden has brought up. The nuclear deal was negotiated based on what we could agree and what we could not agree. This is the deal that was made. The United States has to accept what we agreed upon. We decided not to agree upon certain things, not because we neglected them, but because the United States and its allies were not prepared to do what was necessary. Is the United States prepared to stop selling arms to our region? If it wants to talk about our defense, we spent a seventh of...
Kind of stop it right there. But the whole point is Foreign Minister Zarif was laying out his argument about being able to come back to this agreement once again. And the issue, though, really comes down to, though, because everything that we have seen in the news so far is Israel has said if the United States and Iran go back to this nuclear agreement, regardless of how strict the compliance might be, Israel will strike Iran. So, this is where all the problems are coming in, is on that particular issue right there. Also, another thing here, got this here from Strive to Survive, some wonderful friends there that sent us some different clips there. This is a video of a Sukhoi Russian fighter bomber swooping close to a U.S. Ship there. I believe that was in the Black Sea. Look at this one right here. It seems like the Russians are just playing around with the U.S. Navy. This is U.S. Navy 6th Fleet has shared video of the Russian Su-24 buzzing the U.S. Donald Cook while it was operating in international waters in the Black Sea. And that was January 31st. That's kind of interesting because that's the same ship that a few years back that this happened with. And of course, they nicknamed it the USS Donald Duck afterwards. If I'm not mistaken, that is the exact same ship. And because the Russians were using a jamming software on the Su plane that flew by last time and virtually left the USS Donald Cook as a lifeless vessel. This happened several years back. We reported that back then when it actually happened. Another thing I want to share with you, if you guys remember, I did a special broadcast about Stacey Abrams just recently, and I said, look for her to be the president of the United States in 2024, or a very good possibility. It said to you there was a candidate that we would have a black president in 2024, female president, and that the only information that people would divulge to me is that you will see her rapidly grow to popularity over the next 4 years, and that she was very, very educated woman. And of course, I reached out to Cynthia McKinney, former Congresswoman, good friend of mine. And Cynthia has been here on our broadcast before. And Cynthia also, when I shared with the qualifications that I was looking for, her thought was Stacey Abrams as well. She might be that candidate. Well, Stacey Abrams, as I pointed out in the video not too long ago, very, very educated woman, many, many degrees, multiple degrees there. But yet at the same time, very controversial. Oh, wow. I mean, some of her outlandish policies would really scare the heebie-jeebies out of you. In fact, I was told by former Congressman McKinney that she would make Hillary look like a saint or an angel or something of that effect there. That's just how evil this woman will end up being if she becomes president of the United States. Well, then sure enough, during the 2020 elections here, she was credited in the media as being the one that brought out the vote and overturned the election against Donald Trump and against, or mainly when it came to against the senators that were running in that race there. She caused the Democrats to both win. And now they're putting her up for the Nobel Peace Prize. U.S. voting rights activist Stacey Abrams nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. So yeah, she's starting to move up, just as I was told. You will see that she will rise to popularity very, very rapidly. Greg Palast put her on the calendar in many, many articles that he's written there when she ran for governor against Kemp. She lost to him, and it was claimed that it was fraud on all that. So he really is the one that put her up in the spotlight there. And I've heard some not so good things about him either, but we won't get into that issue right now. Jim Psaki brings up a very interesting point here, and this was something that was shared with me also by my FEMA engineer friend. He had mentioned that two things. One, the clergy response teams for churches have been activated. Wow. Big news right there. T.D. Jakes was one example I was given by my the contractor, excuse me, not the contractor, but the FEMA engineer that I'm good friends with. He said that T.D. Jakes is opening up their church, telling the people they should come in, they should feel comfortable, they're going to make it a place where they can get the vaccine at. But anyway, Jim Psaki is commenting here about FEMA's request for the military. That was also another thing that was shared with me, that the military is getting involved. And also, it was said to me that in Atlanta, where they house the body bags, that they have been requested to move. All the body bags had to be shipped to different locations throughout the United States, and it was done so in a very, very concerning way. And right now there are no body bags left. They were not given the information as to why, but they said there was an urgent need for body bags across the United States. What are they anticipating? I don't know. But let's listen in to Ms. Psaki, the spokeswoman for the Biden administration.
Quick update on there was a question about the White House's support for FEMA's request of troops. We, of course, support a whole of government pandemic response that is catering to the unique issues and needs of our states. FEMA's working in strong partnership with states to get a handle on their needs, and accordingly have requested the significant manpower in some cases for this unprecedented pandemic response effort. I expect we'll have more on this as the days continue this week on how they will be utilized. And last thing I just want to do before we get to your...
All right. So there you have it right there. They are going to have the military work with them. That's concerning for me. I'd been told before that the military's idea was mandatory vaccination. Politicians are against mandatory vaccinations, but voluntarily taking it, basically putting the corporate world threatening you by you can't travel, can't come to our store, things like that. That's what's going to kind of force people into that predicament. Anyway, not very good. The DHS, Department of Homeland Security terror alert issued for the first time in a year targets those upset over lockdowns. Blacklistednews.com reporting this right here. They source this from the Free Thought Project. Said despite Joe Biden's returning on a platform of unity to bring Americans back together before he was sworn in, he reneged on this promise by alienating tens of millions of Trump supporters, essentially declaring them the enemy. Don't dare call them protesters, Biden said after the large peaceful march on D.C., which ended with a few hundred goons out of tens of thousands of peaceful protesters raiding the Capitol. They were riotous, mob, insurrectionists, domestic terrorists. It's that basic. It's that simple. That bugged me as well when I saw that Biden was saying that. Here he is now, the president of the United States, but he was sitting there making all these claims like that. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, it was okay for Antifa and Black Lives Matter to burn down cities, torch people's businesses and their cars and beat people in the streets and things like that. But it's not okay for the people that, even the ones that did breach the White House, walking in, no violence, not beating up anybody, nothing. And of course, they likened it to when it came to Antifa, they said, oh, they were using rubber bullets on them. Well, at the White House, at the Capitol building, they were using real bullets on those protesters. Now, granted, there were some people that ended up dying, police officers. That is a tragedy. That should not have happened. The whole thing, even the siege on the Capitol, was insane. I don't care who you are. Nobody should have breached the Capitol building to begin with. It's just not the way you do things. Protest peacefully. We got to be above all this nonsense. But anyway, this is what the Department of Homeland Security is doing. Terror alert issued for the first time in a year targets those upset over the lockdowns. So that's what they're planning on doing. So the National Terrorist Advisory System has issued a warning that anger fueled by false narratives, including unfounded claims about 2020 presidential election, could lead some inside the country to launch attacks in the coming weeks. They think these people are going to go launch attacks and stuff. I get concerned when you see things like this about false flags and things and then blaming it on the Patriots and stuff. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? This was one thing I want to close in on this broadcast here with. This lady right here, Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is really being hammered by the Democrats because she's got a very passionate feeling about what happened to Trump as she wears her face mask in the Capitol that says Trump won. And of course, she's, as they say, they claim she's into a bunch of conspiracy theories. Some of them probably are conspiracy theories. I can't say they're not. But the point is they're going to railroad her right out of Congress when she was voted in by her peers. And even the Republicans have turned against her. They're afraid for getting reelected themselves. But at any rate, this is what they accuse her of. They said that she attempted to go along with 146 other Republican lawmakers to overturn presidential Joe Biden's 2020 election college victory, and also accuse her of helping to incite the deadly January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. I mean, this is nonsense. She's shown online support for executive law enforcement of officials and prominent Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, former President Barack Obama, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. In other words, she believes they should be locked up. Well, President Donald Trump did the same thing. He believed that as well. She indicated support for the conspiracy theories of including QAnon, Pizzagate, and Frazzle Drip. And I'm not saying that some of that is not conspiracy theory, especially the QAnon thing, but nonetheless, does she not have a right to her own opinion? Does she have to be bowed down to the Democratic, fascist, neo-Nazi agenda? Agreed with posts that mass shootings, including those at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Connecticut, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, and the New Zealand Mosque Massacre were false flag operations. Well, she's pretty doggone accurate, isn't she? But no, you can't dare question the narrative, can you? I'm surprised she didn't say something about 9/11, but maybe she's more for the Israeli side, doesn't want to admit that was really an inside job by Israel. Anyway, she posted menacing campaign imagery targeting progressive Democrats. So anyway, they're working on running this woman out of Washington, D.C., but yet she won in her district 75% of the vote. And Republican Mondaire Jones says, over the past several days, I have heard your calls for accountability. I'm proud to co-sponsor this resolution. And basically, the resolution is to throw her out of Congress. So, there you go. You got your own opinion and it doesn't go with the mainstream narrative. Whoop, you're out. We are headed to a communistic system, friends. That's exactly what's happening in this nation. Unless the people take back their country and demand accountability, that's exactly what's going to happen. And that would require getting all these special interest groups out of Washington. You got to start over is what you got to do. And that special interest groups, that includes the Israeli lobby that is there. That's AIPAC is the biggest problem you have in Washington, D.C. as it is. I mean, we know this. If you remember, Dr. Lorraine Day, when she was on with my wife here before, I actually interviewed her as well, she talked about her husband as a former congressman and how that AIPAC approached him to help him set up his money financing bank there. They wanted to set him up financially to make sure they can press the issues that they wanted. As we know from former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney that's been on the program here, how that she actually fought against having to sign a pledge to Israel for all congressmen coming into office. I mean, this is nuts. And that's AIPAC. There's many other special interest groups that control politics. There shouldn't be any of them be allowed. Period. The people should vote for their representatives, and the representatives should represent the people of their states, their districts, in their states, to do what they can to help the people. Not the globalist, not the special interest groups that are lobbying for the big corporations and big pharma and all that. And by the way, I'm going to come back to that message I did on the teaching I did the other day from John chapter 8. I've really got to take you deeper into this. It is amazing what I have seen in there. But, this is true. It's almost as if Jesus was prophesying of what is happening today in the way he said it. And that's not a direct prophecy. I realize that. But when he talks about, the serpent and which one are you going to give him? If your son asks for a fish, you're going to give him a serpent? Well, he shows you the rise of what would happen. I'm going to go into that a little bit later. Anyway, thank you for listening. Don't forget, empshield.com. Let me just remind you how to do this. All right? We're in January now, but it's always important. In fact, I was talking to a good friend the other day, and I was asking the question about, all right, what would we be dealing with when it comes to we're looking at, the threats of EMP strikes, things like that. The threat seems to be greater and greater all the time. Of course, they always say it's going to be Iran. I do not think it'll ever be Iran that strikes us with an EMP attack. Now, could it be that it is blamed on Iran? Sure. No doubt about that. Right? No doubt about it that it could be Iran gets blamed for that attack, right? But I believe it'd be a false flag, whether it be Israel, whether it be we do it to ourselves. China, there is a possibility with China, but then again, why would China do it? China would only do it because they're wanting to bring about communism and they want to send us into the Stone Age here in order to create more social unrest and things like that. Right? That's the reason these things would happen. So anyway, if you decide to order something on there, and there's all kinds of things on here, don't forget, you click on the product that you want. I always go to the car one to show you guys, and the reason I do is because, my biggest thing has always been, if my wife's in town at the store, especially living here in Tennessee when it's an hour away from town, I want to know my wife's going to get home. I don't want to know that my wife has to walk an hour. Well, it wouldn't be an hour walk. If it was an hour by car, just imagine it. And the weather up here, below freezing, she'd end up dying. how many people would end up dying in their vehicles? I mean, that's something I never even thought about before, but just the fact that you're in your vehicle and you lose power to the vehicle and you're nowhere near home. Granted, there might be a home where you could go to some people's houses close by, but you got to also thinking, everybody's in panic because of something like that happening. But two things in that case I recommend. Even if you can't get an EMP shield, let me encourage you, those of you that you don't have the ability or you procrastinate, at least put blankets in your car. Make sure you have stuff like that in there. Make sure you have extra water in your car and stuff, because if, God forbid, if this ever happens and your family is not with you, you need to know that they can be safe for a longer period of time, especially in this type of weather. So INL50 is the coupon code. They take off $50 no matter how many different things you order. You're always going to get that off of there. They'll apply it. You scroll down, you'll see it every time. And so that helps you. And of course, the company also gives us a little small percentage as well in promoting this product. And I've never promoted any product before until this came along, because I never believed in anything before. So that's the only reason why I do it. Yes, it does bless the ministry. We appreciate that. We appreciate your support like that. And we also appreciate, if you choose to go to our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org, where you can donate online. And by the way, good friends of ours did some updates on this, changed the way the website looks, but our address here in Tennessee, Danoon Institute, or Stephen Benoon, P.O. Box 156, Sunbright, Tennessee, 37872. And you can donate online just by clicking the link there. But real quick, just to show you the channel and how things are going. Our channel here, and we have, all the videos are archived in there now. Very nicely done. These videos cannot be taken down, so that's another good thing there about that. On the home page, you're going to see the most relevant videos that are going on there. And if you look right there on the link there, you can click on that. You've got certain things that are just about news only, the year, things of that nature there. Also, BitChute. Now, Yana we're going to be reopening up her former YouTube channel, Rise Up Children of God. That's going to be, I'm going to put that up on BitChute for you guys, because she's going to start airing her broadcast there. But we did take and we got restarted. I could not figure out how to get into the old INL account I had set up on BitChute originally. So we set one up called Israeli News Live on BitChute. I put the little teaching video I did there. Jesus warned us about the rise of the serpent worship. That's the first one I put there. But we will be loading there as well for things about Israeli News Live, of course, Fact News Network, etc. So I will put a link to the channel there for you guys so that you have that, and we'll be able to navigate over here to this channel as well. I'm Stephen Benoon. Thank you for watching, and you have a blessed evening.